I was always mindful, especially from where Visual I came from, I wanted things to be kind of more uniform, which in a construction environment is really diametrically opposed. If it doesn't happen on time, you don't hit your deadline, what happens? If you get stopped out by your funding line or whatever else, then you're going to be on the wrong side of that particular scenario. Pick your partner well, because let's face it, you're in bed with that person for 2 years, right? Yep. You need to understand who that is, really understand who that is. If your back's against the wall, what they're going to do, how they're going to act, how they're going to react.
Hello, my name is Ben Wilson, and this is the Developers Club podcast. Today, I'm joined by Aaron Emmett of Click, and we're going to be going through all things property development and really going through the detail on Aaron's career and getting lots of advice. It's going to be a fantastic episode. So, Aaron, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Ben.
Welcome. So, let's start at the beginning. Your journey into property, how did you get into it?
Very good question. So started off entrepreneurially. So started off with land, obtaining or trying to obtain planning permission, putting some land deals together. 2011, a friend of mine said, well, look, you've got some land and you've got some planning permission. Why don't we think about building stuff out? Then it went to office to resi conversions, and then through office to resi. With my largest development being 238 homes in 2 buildings, which was
in Slough.
The largest one was in Slough. Yeah. The construction timeline went 868, 238. Wow. So it was like very aggressive.
Very large jumps up. You've worn a lot of hats over your career, and you've had a number of businesses, from Visual I, a software company with Wi-Fi payments, recommended buys, shopping portal, and also an events business. How have having all those different businesses helped you as a developer?
It was mainly the entrepreneurial spirit that came from that. So those companies gave me an entrepreneurial background. The events stuff was really interesting. If you imagine from an events point of view, at 9 o'clock in the morning, an audience walks through the door, do or die, there's a deadline there. You cannot shake that. There's a lot of people walking in to see what this event was about. So that created a specific mentality of work and get stuff done in a deadline. There was also the fact that through what we were doing with the Wi-Fi payment technologies that we did, that had a lot of project management aspects that were key to running construction projects. So I was always mindful, especially from where Visual I came from. I wanted things to be kind of more uniform, which in a construction environment is really diametrically opposed, because they generally aren't as methodical, generally at the smaller end.
They should be.
Exactly that.
Never are.
So they never seem to come together. But that's project management through and through.
Absolutely.
So they all had different things that fed into it. But that doesn't mean to say that that you need that.
Sure.
I don't think you necessarily need that.
You were lucky to have it.
It was just there.
So I always think there's 2 schools of thought on having multiple businesses. My main businesses are development businesses, but I have quite a busy client business now, which for me is a cash flow godsend. Mm-hmm. And I personally always think it's great to have a secondary business that's generating you cash flow and taking the pressure off. Some people say, no, you should put it all on black. You should just have one big business and just go for it. What are your thoughts on that?
If you'd have asked me 5 years ago, I would have probably been all on black. The cash flow aspect's a really important thing, right? Yeah. We, as developers, we're reliant on finance. Inevitably, going back to the project management aspect, right? If it doesn't happen on time, you don't hit your deadline. What happens? If you get stopped out by your funding line or whatever else, then you're going to be on the wrong side of that particular scenario. Having the ability to cash flow, I think it's important. On the smallest, lowest level, having a job that's going to continue to pay and keep that cash flow coming in whilst you're doing your initial developments is a plus. If you scale that up, having the ability to survive a knock is another thing that's quite, it's important.
Yeah,
it's really important.
Well, I recently interviewed a finance broker on this podcast, and we were talking about stress testing deals, and he was saying how important it was to try and stress test things. And I think,
absolutely,
especially with the last 5 years we've had, with all sorts of things happening, whether it be COVID or Liz Truss getting in or whatever it was, we'll come on to that. Stress testing is really important.
100%.
Yeah. And I was going to say, how has your mindset evolved with these things as a developer? Probably comes onto that nicely.
Well, yeah, with everything about risk and risk profiling, if I talk about myself in this way, I think if I'd have gone in with a complete risk adverse nature, such as where the funders and the banks lie, you would never get anything done, right? So there is a certain element where you have to turn around and hit the button and go, right, I'm all in, I'm going now. But then there's the risk management element of making sure that you've covered off the moving parts as best you can, right? So stress testing on your finance, a massive important aspect. Understanding you've got a backup, massively important. Having the education in the first place, right? Understanding what's important and what you need to know going into a deal with just the basics of what you're trying to achieve, massively important. You know, if you're talking about a project and it's just a simple a simple refurb as a development, right? You still want to understand what you're going to be doing, where that refurb's going to come, when it's going to be finished, what you're going to be anticipating and marketing it for. Stress testing your finance on that, massively important, because it's going to be the difference between whether you make money or spend 6 months just working for a learning curve.
For nothing. And, you know, I think we've all been there with deals where I certainly had a deal last year where I did 2 years of hard graft and just got too bogged down in the detail of it, and we didn't lose any money. Luckily, we didn't make any money, and you know it does happen, and that's what you're trying to avoid. Because I don't think people always realise the amount you do put your pound of flesh into developing. It's not people think it's like 20 years ago. You buy one bed, make it into two bed, make 100k, go home. You know the deals are getting more and more complex because there's a lot of people trying to do it, and you really do have to be at the top of your game if you want to make the big money out of the industry. So Aaron, you went from 8 to 68 to 238 units, which is a huge increase. So can we have a little look in the detail about how did you go about acquiring the 8 units? Was it on your own with an investor?
Yeah,
in the detail a little bit more.
So it's proof, basically. So from the background of the entrepreneurial stuff and the land, I started working with what at that moment in time was kind of just a builder mate of mine. He was successfully building, and he pretty much said, look, you know, why don't we develop some of this stuff that you've got? Because prior to that, I was more interested in selling them. So that's where the 8 came in. So we acquired a property which was offices, and we turned it into 8 apartments.
With PD?
Without PD.
Without PD.
So this was prior, because my background was to get planning permission, even to the point where I was actually elected to sit on a planning committee. So goes back to the education, understand what's going on, and really home in on it, and that was really what I wanted to get my teeth stuck into. There was planning stuff. So we then built out these 8 units. He built them out very efficiently. We made very good money out of those units, and people watch, right? So there's people around you that pay attention. And we'd made good money. That came out really, really well. I then went and, in typical fashion, sourced another very great opportunity just before the PD thing happened. Permitted development being turning office buildings into residentials, right? That wasn't something you could do overnight. You needed planning permission. So we then acquired a property which was an old Regis office. And that was a very large building. Bought it incredibly well.
This is the 68?
68. Bought it incredibly well with an investor behind us. So
how did that look in terms of structuring that, with the investor putting in all the equity, half the equity?
Yeah, pretty much most of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite all, but 75% of the equity came from our investor at that point. We then gave him an equity stake in the business. he then put in the capital to get us to where we wanted to do, with the way that the structure happened with priority cash. So the debt stack was that his money came out before profit. We had the profit after he was paid out. Then there was a revenue share and a
Which is the normal way of doing it, really, isn't it?
Normal way. So that gave us the opportunity to make the 68. Now, these 68 units, what we did with those was also quite unique, because whilst they were, I did what was called an underwrite deal, right? So effectively, putting 68 units onto the market in any one given time will generally flood a market. Now, this was again an interesting deal, because I took a whole lot offshore. So I effectively sold the whole lot into Hong Kong. So the reason that we did that, why? Okay, well, the UK marketplace is pretty finite, but the investor marketplace in the UK effectively is biased, right? It knows an area, it knows it very well. What we needed to understand was whether all the key indicators of an area really applied. Well, you can't get any growth if everybody's bedded into the second-hand market, right? You're never going to get that growth. International buyers literally looked at the paperwork. And if you look at an area and you look at the paperwork and that area stacks, rail linked and so on and so forth.
Where was it? Sorry, the development?
Again, this was in Slough. So this was Slough. So this was the first one in Slough.
Crossrail was coming.
Crossrail was coming.
Yeah.
2013, this deal, we did this deal. Crossrail was on the horizon. There was infrastructure going in with the local government, basically building brand new libraries. All sorts of other fantastic things were happening in the area, and that was the underwrite. So what happened was we then took that area from what was literally when our numbers hit the land registry, JLL reported they went up by 15%. That 15% was my profit margin, literally on the second-hand marketplace, because the moment that they all landed, that was our stock hitting, and that basically boosted Slough. And then Slough became this hot spot that in 2014 everybody was talking about. It's never had its day yet.
I used to live in Windsor, so I know Slough quite well. It's an amazing rail link into London. 16 minutes, I think, isn't it? It's
still got so much potential, but high streets abysmal. You know, it's got well, why is that? Well, ADIA, the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, own the 2 shopping malls in the town, right? What are they going to do? Flat them. So when they flat them, if they can actually get over it and build out, that's going to deliver Slough its big moment in time.
Interesting. Have you still got investment there yourself?
No, I haven't. No, I'm still an advocate of it.
You're still an advocate. I can see.
I just you get to believe your own hype, don't you?
I think the hype's true though, and I think it suffered a bit of a bad press with. I think it was Ali G that used to do things about Slough, and it was
The Office. Ricky Gervais, who actually publicly came out and apologised to the town.
Obviously. So, I mean, moving on a little bit, how do you approach and identify and unlocking development potential? What do you look for, I should say, in
numbers talk, always numbers. How you appraise a deal, we're not going to go into that right now, right? But appraising a deal and making sure your number stacks imperative. You can't buy without actually understanding what it is you're buying and how much profit you're potentially going to make. If there is ever a golden rule, it goes back to where I start in this is buy well. You know, I bought well to make money, and the time that on the largest development we still brought really, really well. We were just caught out by market trends and COVID, basically. Buy well. It's always
make your money on the buy.
Always make your money on the buy.
It's an old saying, isn't it? But there's a lot of truth in it. And from looking at some of the deals you've done, it does seem that the difference between your purchase prices and your GDVs is pretty huge.
Yeah.
Your uplift in value is massive. And I guess you're leveraging that, basically.
Leverage the. For me, I was leveraging planning gain.
Yeah.
throwing the planning gain into the development value to then take the development value out. So it was, from my point of view, I was end to end. I took the beginning, what am I going to be building here? What's it going to look like? And what's it going to look like at the end? And how am I going to sell it? It was literally end to end. And as long as I knew that there were bases covered, the stuff that happened in the middle, the construction, was the stuff that, ultimately really can catch you out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very clever and creative. I think, as we mentioned before we sat down, this is really a finance business now. I mean,
Totally is.
the development is very much all about the finance. And your understanding of finance and the clever plays, how has that impacted your developments, do you think?
Well, it depends on which one you're talking about.
I can go through all of them if you want. We've got time.
The
biggest one, for example.
Right, okay. So the largest one. So I'll give you the numbers on that,
Sure,
so you can understand that. So the GDV on the Aspire, the 238 was 74 million, right? The debt that we needed to deliver that was 60 million, right? So as you can see, those numbers I needed a lot of capital to make that come alive, right? So what was that facility, and what did that facility look like? Well, that was what we call a stretch facility, where you would take your traditional lender that would sit at maybe 65% loan to values, and then you would typically put a tranche on the top, a mezzanine finance on the top, and then you go out into the market. So that's how those debt stacks are usually facilitated. I signed with a unique entity at that point from a finance point of view, because I did a stretch facility. So that stretch facility was basically one lender providing a lot more debt, but with a higher uptick on the entire debt stack on which they lent for us, which best laid plans of mice and men. We signed in, that deal was struck and done in December 2019. 2019 being the clues there, right? Where that potentially was headed next, right? So if you can imagine, if that deal hadn't been signed in December and made in December 19, if it had been made in, say, March 2020, the deal wouldn't have happened, right?
Sure.
Because COVID would have bitten by then, the financiers wouldn't have done it, we wouldn't have done it, and that deal would have got put on ice.
Timing's everything, isn't it?
Timing's everything, absolutely everything.
Do you remember the percentages you were paying for the mezzanine, the extra mezz debt?
11.8.
That's for the mezz?
That was for the whole stack. So I paid 11.
Okay.
That
doesn't seem too bad.
In today's market, it's not.
No,
and
but I guess then it was
high then.
0.5% interest
Yeah,
rates.
it was high then.
So things were probably 7.5%.
Absolutely. It was considered
Could be worse though. It could have been 15 or 20% easily. I mean, it's...
Well, that's the point, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at that, and all your numbers are based on delivering that scheme in 2022. So we had a 2-year program, 2-year timeline. We had worst case scenarios. We had all the insurances and stuff in place. It was actually skinned as a deal that stacked. But then the question is, well, did it go wrong? Well, you can say, well, we delivered the homes, we supported the entire deal all the way through. It just wasn't delivered in 2022. It was delivered in 2024. So then the question then becomes, well, what happened? Right. Well, COVID happened. In July 2022, our main contractor, glorified builder, the builder goes into bankruptcy. What do you do at that point? You then...
Why do they go into bankruptcy, do you think? Don't mind me asking.
Hyperinflation. The
fixed
Russian
price
war,
contract.
Yeah, our contract was very well negotiated, and they didn't have any headroom. So to the point where I didn't make a single variation in our contract, not a single variation. A contractor would make margin on variations, but we didn't have. We had 5 or 6 items of provisional sums.
That's they get out of jail free.
They didn't have it. They didn't have it, and our contract was finite, design and build, and so therefore their top line was always bolt on, which meant that my margin was perfectly well balanced if they delivered on time. Well, clearly they didn't deliver on time because they went bankrupt. Did they go bankrupt just because of my deal? No. They had a very large other deal that tipped them over. They were trying to do too much. This other deal and our deal, it was taken out. We then had to step through. So I became contractor at that point. So July 2022, main contractor goes under. I then become a main contractor in our own right overnight, not quite within 8 weeks.
Not ideal, is it?
Not ideal at all. You don't want to do it. So it's like, but we had no choice. It was like, manage the situation as you see it. So we managed that situation as best we could. And then another interesting thing happened. I would have probably been able to survive that. I think we would just about got through that. But that happened, then we had Liz Truss. So when Liz Truss
Good old Liz.
Good old Liz. The irony is, I don't think our politics are that bad, but the fact is the market didn't believe in her. But what then happened? Well, interest rates go skyrocket. We then lost our buyer. So we had a buyer lined up. So the
Housing Association?
No, it was a PRS player, a build to rent player.
Yep.
They then fell out of bed. So you then lose your sale, and at that point there, it's like, okay, who are we going to exit to? We still haven't finished the building, but who are we going to exit to? And then another interesting thing happened, which is the absolute nail in the coffin. So when Liz Truss had her moment, the euro against the pound dropped. So you've now got another scenario where the euro's dropped drastically against the pound. What does that lead to? Well, remember, she came into power in November 2022. She leaves power in similar period of time, but the legacy,
couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The legacy was that the euro and the pound tanked. Our workforce was built up mainly of Eastern Europeans, right? They went home at the end for Christmas 22, and half of them returned. So if you appreciate you're Eastern European and you're not going to get paid 15%, 20% lower income, they disappeared. They didn't come back. So that was it. So at that point there, half the workforce, productivity drops, you aren't finishing this building on time. And banks make their money off of time, right? Their business model is diametrically different from ours. We manage risk. We put everybody in. We bake the cake as a developer. As a developer, the cake gets baked, and we take all these elements, finance being one of them, contractors, and we make this great big, fantastic cake, which is supposed to look and
or not so fantastic.
Exactly. But that's the point. They make their money by literal time. So for them, the clock was ticking. Did they let us off the interest? No. Did we finish the building? Yeah, we finished it. We delivered it. We handed it over with a bow wrapped on it, even with another sale lined up. But it's like,
so just we're talking about, you said you realised your builders were going under.
Yeah.
What were the warning signs? Just because a lot of people listening to this will be, or watching this will be, getting into development. Not they'll be doing 238 units, but what were the warning signs?
Right, that's a really, really good question. So there's lots of professionals on site, project monitors, PQSs, quantity surveyors looking at this, right? There's loads of them, layers of them. They didn't have a clue. The credit safe reports on the contractor at June 2022 said that their credit's safe, right? What gave it away? I'll tell you exactly what gave it away. Walking around on site. I was on site, knee deep in that site because I was living and breathing it. I had an inclination around about January, February, things weren't quite right. I was on site talking to every single member of the team. It was like plumbers, electricians. Is everyone getting paid? Yes, people were getting paid. Were they having their terms stretched? Yeah, they were. So I knew that I was paying our main contractor at a specific point in time, that the money was taking a bit longer to filter down, but not outside the realms of what was normal. But it was enough for me to set my thought process go. So I'd then go back and ask the rest of the professional team, are we okay? Are we okay? Yes, we're okay. Yes, we're okay. Until June 2024. Literally it was, and in June the 24th, not June 2024. It was until June the 24th.
Wow.
And so those dates are burned into.
No, I bet.
Yeah, I had a meeting on the 24th of June, and that was when I fished it out of the main contractor, and I was like, "You're gonna tell us what's going on now?" And
it came out.
That was it. It came out.
It's amazing what you can learn from speaking with the labourers and
100%.
the people who are in theory are on the lowest rung of payment on the site, but they actually will tell you a lot, and especially the loyal ones. You can really find good information out.
Always.
That's why you've got to treat them well as well.
100%. I learned this from Debbie Applin. She was one of my non-execs, and she did it really well. So she was Tony Pidgley, Berkeley Homes. Tony Pidgley. She was his right-hand girl. Debbie was, and I watched her do it. When she came on my site, she was into everybody with their names.
Yeah.
Wanted to meet everybody on the site.
Just say hello to people as well. It's amazing how many people don't do it. Even on our site, sometimes, not so much anymore, but you have an investor of mine come on site, and sometimes you notice that they don't always say hello to everyone, and when it's an investor who's giving you millions of pounds, it's quite hard to say, well, come on, you should be saying hello to people. But it's amazing when people don't.
Ivory Tower is what, look, you've got different walks of life, right? These guys are different from us. We're the developer, right? But if you maintain that, I'm the developer, I'm here, I'm paying everybody's wages, right? You are going to get screwed.
Absolutely.
I think. Being
and they work very hard as well, right? So there's not many people that are happy to carry up 1,000 bricks a day up 4 flights of stairs. Like,
you got it.
It's backbreaking work. It's not easy, and it's
100%.
You're only really as good as your team at the bottom. I don't like saying the bottom because it sounds pejorative, but you're only as good as your labourers, basically. And it filters up from there.
It's cliche, but there are you can't build anything without them. Right, you need every single person in there, and they all need to do their job properly, so they're all worthwhile, right? And I think it's very short-sighted to burn contractors. I think it's very short-sighted to treat people badly. I think clearly, look, going back to the 68 units, it was a regular thing. We'd need six to eight plumbers on site, and we'd only get 4 or 5 on a Monday.
On a Monday, funny that.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know why, but yeah.
So Aaron, you've talked about how this huge deal, 238 units that you did, unfortunately for a number of reasons didn't work out. So what happened with that? Were you repossessed? How did it end up?
Not quite repossessed, but the writing's on the wall when you've got a very large development overruns on time, right? Okay, at that point there you start working pretty much for the funder, and that's what happened. We had a very good relationship with the funder, naturally, because we were all in the same boat. Main contractor had gone under. We had to get the property finished. I managed to line up another sale on the largest part of the building, but the reality is a contract's a contract. I had to deliver that scheme, and I wasn't actually. Our equity was sunk, my position was sunk, and clearly we were in the hole. We had the ability to survive somewhere into January 2023 at this point. Well, we didn't finish that building until 2024, right? So, I was then pretty much working to deliver it just for the funder and basically get out. But that's what we did. We finished the building. We didn't cut a single corner. The homes were delivered to a really, really good standard. And that's what it was. So, came out with the reputation, I suppose.
I was going to say, credit to you. You kept your reputation, and things do go wrong, don't they? And it's interesting. You see how people behave when they do go wrong, and credit to you. You behaved well and got it finished. So that's impressive. We've talked a little bit about deal structures and how you've approached financial challenges. But so, Aaron, talking about property development moving forward, we talked about your past deals. There's obviously a lot of change in the industry, and I know that you're a bit of an expert when it comes to modular construction. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
That's something that really does interest me. And off-site construction, volumetric and modular construction is obviously a part of what is considered to be off-site. So what's off-site? So I actually was fortunate enough to win an award for this by the Property Week Trailblazer of the Year.
Trailblazer.
Yeah, because what I was doing was effectively taking airspace deals, and airspace, which is basically building on top of another building.
Yep.
And the way that I tackled that was to build off-site, then arrive with a crane and then crane the units on top, right? Okay, in simplistic terms, that's exactly what we were doing. It sounds very simple, but
just connect the services and away you go.
Yeah, exactly that. And when you break it down and put it as simple as that, it does sound like, it's dead easy. That's a great way to do things, right? Except it's massively complicated because you're effectively putting a crane with a load of very, very heavy boxes on top of a building that's already there with people that potentially underneath it. So, it's not quite as black and white as that.
Actually difficult.
But, there's a lot that goes into the coordination of that. And that off-site stuff was really, really intriguing. And it goes back to my project management aspect and the aspirations of wanting to try and uniform things, right? Off-site gives you a really good ability to control what you are doing and uniform it. So effectively, but what you tend to find with modular and off-site construction is it needs templates for it to really work. And what is off-site construction? Well, effectively, in our simplest of terms, we were taking some apartments that we were going to build on top of an existing building, and we were building them literally in a big warehouse, and then taking the square boxes to the point where we would then crane them and put them on the top, right? That, in a nutshell, that's what we were doing. But you could then take those square boxes and effectively go, well, you can put those on top of somewhere else. And that gave us the ability to control our environment. We weren't working at height, for an example. We weren't working in an environment that was necessarily inherently dangerous. And we were then going to crane on top, which, that was the modular off-site stuff. So there's loads and loads of stuff that goes behind that. But
sure.
It was an interesting time.
I know. I mean, I have looked into doing airspace deals, and I know that they are complex, and I think they're particularly complex in the sense that you're often, if you're dealing with a freeholder with leasehold flats below, perhaps that might be easier. But if you've got a share of freehold building with 20 or 30 share of freeholders, I mean, I would imagine that would probably be a bit of a nightmare. But what are the complexities of airspace deals when it comes to dealing with either the tenants that you're trying to, or that own the freehold company that you're trying to buy the rights to, or how does that work?
It was an industry at one point, and it's not anymore, but it was an industry in its own right back in 2021 and 2022, etc., in the early 20s. And the reason it was an industry was because at that point there, we were looking around, scrabbling around where we're going to build, especially in London, right? So building on top of an existing building made a lot of sense. Post Grenfell and what happened after
Building
that,
Safety Act.
Building Safety Act, then it basically blew it out. So if it's over 11 metres, then there's the 11-metre rule, and ultimately what happens now in today's world is if you would retrospectively have to sprinkler a building if it goes over 18 metres, and ultimately that rules out a lot of that development. It was also considered to be they brought in permitted development rights to extend above certain points, which also
post 1940, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, planning rules changed. That was a good tick in the right box. But that soon changed with the Building Safety Act. In essence, now there's no real point in doing airspace
unless it's at low level, I guess.
Low level.
2-story building, you can do 3, but it's not really.
But it doesn't come into its own in the same way as it should do, because the deals don't stack. So it goes back to the numbers, right? If you need to be able to put a certain amount of volume on it, or in a certain GDV in a certain place. Yeah. And actually, if the deal doesn't add up, then it doesn't get built.
It's a shame, really, because airspace deals, you've also got the benefit, I guess, of building penthouses and sub-penthouses, which have a massive uplift in terms of GDV on the way out. I mean, you might get 20-30% more for a penthouse over a flat that's on the second floor, 4 floors below, or whatever.
Absolutely have, totally. That's the thing. They were always seen to be quite glamorous, and they were interesting. The fact that we were building them was
Lots
really
of outside
cool.
space.
Outside space, it was great. They were good. But you can't forget that wherever you're building, there's people below you, right? So those people need to
You must
be
have a lot of headaches.
protected. Huge headache, especially when you imagine taking the roof off and then it pissing down. Imagine taking the roof off and then it absolutely flooding with rain.
Yeah.
On a July summer's day in the middle of the summer.
Yeah.
Can imagine what chaos that could cause.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
those are some of the problems that we had with it.
And so when you were doing these airspace deals, were you using option agreements, or how did it work? How did you structure them?
Again, it's really nuanced, Ben. So you can, we would only, to de-risk our position, we would only purchase an airspace right once we've got the ability to see that it's gone through planning and then we load the payment of that when the buildings are finished. You had to clear through loads of leasehold problems. Typically, for an airspace deal, you would see that a badly drafted airspace proposition could kill it. Why? Because imagine a solicitor takes this and treats the airspace as a bit of land, right? And they just think of it as land and go, oh, we'll just grant the airspace, and it's badly drafted. A badly drafted airspace opportunity meant that it's dead in the water and it can't be delivered. Yeah. And so therefore the solicitor that actually drafted that would inadvertently screw it up, unfortunately, because it was only the simple fact of not considering the people below, their tenant right, not analysing the existing leases, what rights those people already had. You know, if there was things in leases where we
the Duval case now with leases where that's caused a lot of problems on our sites that we're buying. You know, not giving permission, freeholder not being allowed to give permission under the terms of the current leases without consent from everybody in the building. 100%, essentially.
And you've got it right. If they can't,
we've had a lot to deal with over the last few years, haven't we, as developers?
Yeah. Well, you know, this is why there's no houses being built.
I know. And the problem is I think the government don't understand the detail on it a lot of the time, and that's the problem.
You know, it's like, I totally agree, Ben.
And so we've talked about how airspace you don't think is particularly viable anymore for the reasons you've said. What trends do you think are viable? Where do you see the market going in the next 5 years? I think big question. It's
a really big question. If I were to put my money on the only places that we can build now, it would be release a greenbelt, single family units, that kind of stuff. Because let's face it, big developer, small developer, no matter where you sit, building a house is a lot simpler.
You mean self-building or not?
Not quite. No, I think maybe self-building. That's another flawed market, right? Okay. Do you want me to bore you with the detail of it? But the principle of being able to house build in the same way as what Taylor Wimpey do when they build a site, and building like nice developments, those kind of things are where we're going to see housing stock come and be delivered realistically. Self-building, they're a nightmare to finance. Yeah. Right, you can't finance them.
Absolutely,
because
there's only a couple of lenders that will do it. I think.
Who does it? Yeah. Right, you can't get. You might have somebody who owns a bit.
It's
of land.
regulated, isn't it? And they want it to be unregulated lending, really.
Right, exactly that. It's exactly the point. You've got that crossover between who's going to do it. Right? Is it regulated lending or is it unregulated lending? How does you? Even if the landowner.
It's a hangover from 2008, really, isn't it? 100%. Everything was changed with.
Well. That's the point, right? And the self-build, there is no such thing as the self-build market, because somebody who is self-building has to have the cash, right? Yeah. It's the only way that they can deliver their house. And actually, why are they doing that? For a 25% profit, 20% profit? Yeah. Well, you build your dream home, but you know, if you can't finance it because bridging's too expensive and a regulated lender won't go anywhere near it, and then Homes England try and step in and offer some form of solution to make everybody happy, and it never works, and it's like, well, you're never building, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No,
and because the self-builder's got to learn all our disciplines, right? Yeah. They've got
which is not easy to do. I mean, you've got to wear, as I said before, a lot of hats.
Yeah.
So you've gone through quite a lot of stress, it seems, as a developer. So I know that you do well. I've read up a little bit about you at one stage you were power boating, which probably isn't. I'm not sure. Is that stress relieving?
Definitely not.
No, because I'm learning to fly myself, and people say, "What do you do to relax?" I say, I'm learning to fly, and it's actually because it switches my brain off, and you can't think about anything else other than not crashing the plane.
Yeah,
and I don't know whether it's the same when you're in a powerboat doing 100 knots or whatever.
Yeah, it was. It's good fun. It was great fun. It was great fun. It was, but again, definitely not stress free. The only reason I stopped powerboat racing, deep breath, is someone died.
I read it. I'm sorry to hear that.
There was only we had 8 boats in the last race. There's 16 guys. Those odds aren't good. And the guy, you've got an environment.
Quite easily, don't they?
Yeah, rolled over, and then unfortunately came out. And there was another boat behind him, and it took Mike's life. Really, 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 really tragic. But it was great fun until that moment.
Until you did that. But on a more sort of spiritual level, I understand you do Vipassana meditation, which I have to say, my mother's telling me I need to meditate. So maybe off the back of this chat, I'll try. And I'm not sure I can do a Vipassana meditation. It sounds intense, but you tell me what's that about? How does it help?
So, you talk about stress. Okay. That is probably the most stressful thing I've actually ever had to cope with.
The accident?
No, actually not the accident.
Oh, no, the Vipassana meditation. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'll explain why. So it's effectively 10 days, no talking, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going to bed at 9 o'clock at night. And in between, all you do is meditate, right? No visual contact, can't say hello, can't speak to anybody. You are with other people, but you are literally sitting there and meditating, and you're going through that process, and it's mind blowing because it's a washing machine for your brain, and you just can't. Most people will leave after 24 hours because it's painful, because you've got to sit still, right? You try and sit still for that amount of time. Gosh. Your body, your mind, everything is saying move. Do something different, run away. I'm too important to be here. I've got too much going on. I've got to get out. But you do that, and then what it teaches you is balance. And there is an immense amount of satisfaction from understanding that balance, which is purely that things ebb and flow. You've got problems, and then you've got things that are really nice, because the meditation through it, 1 minute's painful, and then you get a euphoric feeling, and you go through those pain and euphoria moments, and then it's like, well, actually, that's a metaphor for life.
Absolutely,
and it gives you that.
Everything's cyclical, isn't it? And that's kind of another version of it. So, how important do you think holistic wellbeing is for developers?
Well, I know loads of people that don't do it.
Yeah,
it's just my mechanism. Yeah, look. I think most of us become a developer because we look at money. If I'm honest, I think everybody looks at it. We go, you can make money by doing it, and there's something that brings us all into that environment. I think it is a stressful place to work, and it's famine and feast. You've mentioned cash flow. I think there's all sorts of different things, but the meditation is something that's part of my life. So, and
do you see other people doing it or not? Do you think it's still quite rare in the industry? So. No, maybe that could be a business for you, starting up.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone else meditates. Yeah.
No, fair enough. And in terms of collaborating with people and strong relationships within your team, sort of digress a little bit. How do you maintain those relationships and collaborate together?
Deals. As long as everyone's bringing something to the party, whether someone's bringing the money to the party, someone's bringing the expertise to the party, someone's going to add value, then the collaboration's worthwhile, right? Pick your partner well. Because let's face it, you're in bed with that person for 2 years, right?
Yep.
And you need to understand who that is, really understand who that is. You said it yourself, if your back's against the wall, what are they going to do? How are they going to act? How they're going to react?
So, Aaron, I know that you're now working with Edmond de Rothschild, a huge name in the finance business. So how's that come about? And tell us a little bit about that.
I think it goes back to the fact that I was saying earlier, which was when you're put in an environment and you're put in the pressure cooker, the tumble dryer of bricks, as I called it, you people are watching. And though I'm only consulting with them, I'm doing bits and pieces, but effectively they had a couple of things on the horizon that they just wanted to understand whether they were deliverable, and a few things in the past which they needed to navigate. And ultimately, they looked at my skill set and went, "Well, you're actually somebody that understands all this stuff, and we can see the benefit in helping us get to the next step." And watch your space. I don't know where it's going to necessarily go. It's very young at the moment.
Sure. Very interesting, I would think.
Oh yeah, it is.
And also the beauty of it not being your deals is that you can kind of helicopter above and have absolute objectivity, no emotional attachment to any of it, and that makes you make, I think, better decisions generally.
100%.
That's the beauty of it.
There is a really powerful place to actually make that decision from, because effectively I do think differently from the rest of the team. That's noticeable, primarily because I've only ever been in charge of my own money. Right?
Sure.
Only ever been in charge. A deal happens with my, where I've owned it literally to every single tile that's put on a wall. Right. Whereas in this environment, I've kind of got slightly different levers to pull,
Sure.
But the end goal is the same, which is delivering homes and delivering investor value and returning money and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting.
It sounds exciting. No, I bet you do. I bet you do. And it's kind of it's a totally different way of looking at things, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So that's great. You've obviously come to the Developers Club and you've actually done talks at the Developers Club. So you know that we're a community of young developers. And how valuable do you think it is to have mentors and advisors who have done it, been there and done it?
Really, 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 really beneficial. And the reason being, if that mentor stops you from making a mistake, then that's going to alleviate a huge pain for you, right? So I totally advocate it, because the people I've had in my world have helped me do that. And the times that I've been arrogant, I've always made a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think I've got a couple of friends who are more successful developers than I am, and they're great sounding boards to be able to say, look, what do you think of this? And they normally give you very good advice, because they don't really care if they're being harsh or not, they're being honest.
Yeah, it's honest, straight up.
Absolutely. And so how has the Developers Club played a role in your journey? Can you speak of any experiences specifically?
Yeah, I've met a group of good, solid guys that I enjoy spending time with. And girls, yes, and Rose as well, yeah. It's true. I've met a good group of people that are really positively motivated, doing good things. They're all doing things in the right way, and they're shaking and moving.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's definitely some talented people there for sure. And what advice would you give developers about their own support systems?
Fools rushing where angels fear to tread. Right.
Fools rushing where angels fear to tread.
Yes.
Good tongue twist. Who wants that when you're drunk, would you?
I think that's the thing. Make sure you just know your numbers. Make sure you thoroughly researched before you take action. Right? Literally, you've got to know what you're doing. But that's, again, goes back to a mentor, right?
Absolutely. And just one other thing in terms of, is there any particular piece of advice that's really shaped your career? I know that's kind of one, but is there anything else you can think of? It's always good to have these.
Any good thing of piece of advice, one anecdotal piece.
It doesn't have to be necessarily to developing. It could be anything to do with your business career or even just life in general.
Yeah, I think I take a lot more out of the meditation than anywhere else.
Yeah.
So again, if anything I'm going to say would be cliche, because it's going to come from there.
So that's all right.
Yeah.
So meditation and really trying to balance. It's very frenetic being a developer, and it's trying to have a balance of working 100-hour weeks, but then actually having time when you downtime.
Totally. Because where I am today, this shall pass is the thing. This is the point. It's like there is the property world is cycles, and it goes up and down, and I understand that. So it's like advice. That's my work. That's where I'm at the moment.
Good advice. And how can people get hold of you, Aaron? What's the best way to contact you?
I've got aaronemmett.com, which is effectively the website. So you can reach out on there.
On the contact page on the website. Fantastic. Thank you, Aaron. I'm Ben Wilson of Knight James. I've been your host for the Developers Club podcast, and I've been joined by Aaron Emmett of Click. Thanks again, Aaron. We've got the Developers Club social media tag at thedevelopersclub.uk, and you can also search the Developers Club podcast on Apple and Spotify and YouTube.